Welcome. Welcome. This is the first in a series of podcasts come radio shows come multimedia extravaganzas. It's called It's Good to Talk, and we're broadcasting, well, we're broadcasting from all over the world because it's 10 o'clock in Buenos Aires, 2 o'clock in London, 3 o'clock in Rotterdam, and 4 o'clock in Greece, and that's the range of people that we've got talking today for the first of these podcasts. It's good to talk, culture, creativity and community, challenges, crisis and change. It's just a very straightforward idea. Each program is going to last an hour, and we're recording it as live in the form of a radio show and a podcast. We're trying to stream it live on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube later, and it will also be part of a radio program for Resonance 104.4 FM and on resonancefm.com on the web. So what we want to do is have a series of conversations and discussions with individuals or groups, people in the creative world, about what they do, what motivates them, how they think about their practice, and how that's articulated with their communities in mind. A lot of us are working directly with communities. So we want to talk about that through a personal lens as much as an institutional one. So most of the people we talk to do work for institutions, but this is really a lot about their personal voice and their personal experience. And we're all interested in theory needing to be rooted and informed by practice, and the sort of dialogues that we will have and need to have with citizens and communities. We all think that's really important in what we do. It's not intended to be about COVID, particularly these programs, but obviously the crisis we're experiencing all over the world has brought a lot of our thinking to the fore. It's speeded it up, and certainly the power of talking, testimony, and listening to each other maybe now has a different focus. And we also think people are living, all of us, in different forms of isolation across the world. And some of us are having more time to talk and consider things in a different way in neighbourhoods and communities. A lot of people haven't got that access, but some of us have and are using technology. So all of this, I think we'd like to talk about, how it's affecting us, how we see the world, how we can use our recent experiences going forward in the future. And we hope that we'll extend this conversation over the coming weeks to as many people who'd like to take part. But that's how we'll go, and we're going to have a chat for the next hour. Nicole.
Yes.
And I'm Donald Isler, by the way. I should say that. I'm Donald Isler. Go on.
Yes, Donald. We are sort of co-hosting this together. We know each other for a long time. Well, my name is Nicole van Dijk. I'm from Rotterdam, a curator and program leader of social heritage programs. I'm very much interested in the cultural, of the power of culture and heritage in making a social change and helping communities. I also have been actively involved in the board of CAMOC, which is a part of ICOM, and there I learned to know Marlen Mouliou, who was the chair in that time of the board of CAMOC. So she will be a guest of our show today, and also Magdalena Ayerra, but people who know her better are allowed to call her Lali, and well, she gave us the permission to call her that way. So welcome both of you in this show from me and Donald. Let me start with Marlen. Can you please shortly introduce yourself?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Nicole and Donald, for this invitation, which didn't come as a surprise. Knowing your work for so many years, you always bring new ideas and new ways to connect the community of professionals and the community at large. So I immediately said yes, would like to join you in this conversation. As you said, my name is Marlen Mouliou. I am from Athens, Greece. I work for the University of Athens, the National and Kapodistrian University, as we call it. I'm a professor of museology for some years now, working for the Faculty of History and Archaeology and the postgraduate programs of museum studies. I also try to work internationally through voluntary work in different networks that are very important. And ICOM is a big family of museum professionals that connect us all. This is where I met you in CAMOC, the committee for the city museums. We know 20 years now. It was a very interesting experience for me to see how city museums work now. They are very hybrid museums, very much contemporary, but also historical as well, with their rich collection. And I'm also judge from EMYA for the European Museum of the Year award. In fact, if all went well, we would return yesterday from the annual meeting we usually hold end of April, beginning of May, to announce the new awards, the best museums of the year. But this has been postponed for some time later in the year. It's another area where we value a lot the museum innovation and the public quality, and we try to find the best examples all over Europe to learn from them and connect with the different new practices. Yeah. And see exactly as Donald said before, how theory connects to practice and how this is important for society.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And Lali, can you tell us a little bit of what you're doing in Buenos Aires?
Yes, well, the same. Thank you, Donna and Nicole, for having me. Nice to talk to you, Marlen. It's a very good and nice opportunity to share our experiences and reflect on ideas and insight that we are going through in these special moments or situations. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I am a political scientist, and I have been working on developing and implementing urban redevelopment and place-based cultural projects over the last 10 years, 10 years. The Arts District was the first most important initiative I worked on. There I had the great opportunity to meet Donald here in Buenos Aires. And then I have a great opportunity to go to London and study a master's in urban sociology. And I came back to Buenos Aires and I started working for the Ministry of Culture, leading a new project called Barrios Creativos, the Spanish of created neighborhoods. And it's inspired by the London Borough of Culture, a similar program that the City of London had. The objective of this program is to create local cultural networks that reflect the identity of each area of the city through the direct participation of the communities. Well, now, obviously, because of the COVID, the program has been put on hold. But yeah, that is basically what I do.
Yeah. Thank you. When I hear you talking, you both, I hear Lali saying that actually your work has stopped now because of the corona crisis we are experiencing. Mm-hmm. And for you, Marlen, you are also teaching at the university, so that is continuing at the moment. Mm-hmm. One way or the other, I suppose.
It continues online, yes.
Yeah. So, Lali, is there a possibility also in Buenos Aires to work online with the community?
Yes. Well, the thing is, because of given the situation, we have to readapt and rethink all the content and transform every content whenever it's possible to be virtual. But thanks. There are some things that it's impossible to do. So that was our first measure, to transform the programming to virtual, broadcast online, or going live with, you know, workshops, interviews, classes. But specifically with Creative Neighborhood, we just can't, because it's like about, well, it could, but we have to have more time to rethink, because it's about, you know, gathering or thinking, you know, sharing, or yeah, to create and design a project. So we are trying to see the way to do it online. But yeah, it's like it's not easy. It's not easy.
No, it is not. So we are trying to do the same. We are organizing online story cafes where people share their stories from a certain neighborhood. And we experience then there is more intimacy in one strange way, but it is, of course, harder to reach all the people, especially those who are not connected or not easily connected. So in the Netherlands, luckily, we have lots of people with access to the internet, really very a lot. But I can imagine that maybe in Buenos Aires it's different.
Well, the thing is, with the access to internet is a really important issue here, especially for elderly people. Elderly people, they feel frustrated or overwhelmed with technology. They simply don't know how to use it, or they even don't have access to it. So we are trying to create or exploring different alternatives to reach senior citizens, because we think that they are the most vulnerable sector nowadays, because isolation, because they feel lonely, they don't have access to the apps. So we are trying to figure out what projects or program could be better, or to somehow minimize the negative impact of the quarantine for them.
I think that's right. You know, they're talking about in the UK an app to going forward to involve with tracing and everything, but a significant number of people, mainly the groups you're talking about, haven't got access to that technology yet. So it also will rely, that particular thing, on local networks and people notifying by word of mouth and basically community networks. And I think that's one of the challenges for us as well, because I think there's been a rush in the cultural world to go straight to digital in how we, and you can completely understand that, and some of it's innovative and has engaged people, but there's no discourse with the public about what it is that we can really target at them. It's just this sort of overwhelming amount of digital experience, and you know, well, it's the same in all our countries, but I know in Argentina, Lali, you know, there is some massively difficult issues around poverty and hyperinflation and all those sort of things. And it's how is, you know, a digital tour of a museum is perhaps not quite what people need at this point. In a or one of the things, they need something more. And, you know, can we look at digital in other ways in a more, you know, in a two-way active process?
Yeah,
Marlen, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I would say also that community networks, digital community networks, are very, very important, and I'll come to this in a moment. But what we need more to start with, in order to have also community networks through the web, is solidarity groups, groups that exist in physical terms, and they can get together and help the members of the community that are more fragile and need more support. And I was in that direction. I was reading an article some days ago in The Guardian about the solidarity movement that naturally, organically was organized in favelas in Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, which is not a surprising thing for me. I've been in Brazil quite a few times and in two favelas, and the first time I went, what really was very striking for me and very moving was the feeling of community inside, outside the web. These strong community bonds that I know from the beginning that they will not have the support that is necessary to have from the government, from the state. So in order to just wait for this support to come one day or never, is really get all their strength and be innovative and proactive and help each other. And the same experience we can see in other areas, like in Greece. Greece has just was entering a new phase. I cannot say left the crisis that we had for more than a decade, but we're going out of the tunnel, as we say. And now the pandemic has caused and will cause a huge problem with in our main industry, which is the tourism industry. But what we faced, what we experienced during the crisis, the economic crisis, was exactly that we stood standing because of the solidarity that there was among the people, among the communities at large extent, and of course the family bonding as well, which is very important. And this is how also it worked in Greece during this period of hardship, these last few weeks, that we, contrary to our nature that is very, very temperate and very spontaneous, we became very obedient and very patient, which is not part of our national DNA. And we stayed at home. We respected the orders in order to protect the elderly in our families, and not only, but because we knew older and younger people that we have to be really extra careful for the sake of those in need. So I think because we will be talking a lot about digital in the coming weeks and you know, in the future, in the present, it's already here. We must not forget that it's not just the technology, it's the people that make the technology.
Absolutely.
To do one or the other.
It's only the digital can only exist in its content can only be made and it's controlled by people. I think that's a really great point, that physical solidarity and communities are the things that provide the core to it.
Yeah, and Lali, can you tell us a bit about how you were making space for like senior citizens before the crisis came to us? Because I can imagine their position in society wasn't easy at that time, because you just emphasized that at this moment it's difficult for them, but I can imagine it was difficult before that time.
Yes.
Before as well.
Yes,
so,
it was difficult because I think that most important because of our economic crisis. Before the pandemic began, we were already in struggling with recession, inflation, devaluation, and when I talk about inflation, we're talking about 50% of an inflation, where, you know, a basic product like milk or bread could double its price for 1 month to the next. So, and we are talking about poverty around 30%. An estimation shows that maybe we could reach to 50 when this pandemic ends. So, like, you know, those are our numbers, and it's like very difficult in this, well, economically talking. Before this crisis began, we had, you know, different type of programs for elderly people, and the retirement centers that the ministry has, around 30 or 40 centers around the city. Now with the ministry, we are thinking new ways to connect with them. In this month, I was volunteering in a program that the government has implemented for elderly people, for senior citizens, and I had to talk with them every day, and I realized that they want to be listened, to talk, to share their stories, their experiencing, to express what they were dealing with, just talk, and feel they matter. So one of the programs that we are thinking is it's called Mi Foto, Mi Historia. It's my picture, my story, and we like to encourage them to send us a picture through maybe WhatsApp, because it's the most common application, and we think that is the one that they are more familiar with. But to share a picture and relate it to a story, and could be, their neighborhood or with their family, whatever. And that story could be the bridge to younger generations, because, for instance, if an old lady described a picture, her neighborhood, what was like back in the day, and connect or contrast with the neighborhood of young people nowadays, that could be a possibility. Also, the Museum of Modern Art is already working in a project with elderly people called A Window to the World, by which they encourage elderly people to create a photo story that reflects their daily life through 5 pictures. Those type of initiatives we are thinking to work with them. So yeah, but yes, the things weren't very good before, but we have some ways to connect with them. And now, well, with this isolation, we are trying to figure out new ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a very beautiful way to connect with these groups of people, of course. And it makes me also think about what you said last week, to what you were telling me, Marlen, about a project you set up with a student. Maybe you can tell a bit more about that.
Yeah, it's very much into the direction just now we were talking. At the beginning of the lockdown in Greece, we were, as all, browsing a lot in the social media, and we could sense that people were getting very anxious and very worried about the social distancing, about losing the connection with the community. Also about losing what they had already taken for granted, like the freedom to travel, to be connected with friends, to go to the seaside, etc. So as that mood was picking up, I thought, and I was talking with 2 friends and colleagues, and a friend who works for the cultural capital of Ulysses. Next year we will be here in Athens. It is in our city, and a former student of mine, and we started developing an idea. What if we create in the web, using the current social media, Facebook and Instagram, both of them, because they are targeting different age groups and different habits in the use of the internet, to create an alternative museum. A museum that will connect us in a different way. It will not be a substitute to the museums that already exist and will be they would be working online, but create a safe space to connect between us and through the medium of the museum as a concept, as something that is very valuable in our lives. So we created 2 different collections, one in Facebook and one in Instagram. They are different to each other, but the concept is bridged in both of them, the museum inside me. In Instagram, we call users to upload photographs from museums with themselves inside the photograph, to remember these moments in the museum and to share with us through their stories in Instagram. And we connect, and then we bring all together, these stories, into one profile in Instagram, so that we have a collection there. And the other one is in Facebook, and we invited users to bring an object, anything that is from their own home, because our houses are spaces of seclusion, but of thinking and creativity nowadays, are museums for ourselves as well. They bring a lot of memories, they have a lot of objects. They are our little universes, and it also to show that museums, the formal museums, the museums that we all know, are not very far from this concept. They have collections, material and immaterial things that relate to people of any time in the past or the present, and they tell stories. So we wanted to create museums that tell stories about ourselves in our everyday environment. And it was amazing how this developed, because I started at the end of March. We went online, end of March, just a week after the lockdown. And now, after a few weeks, we have more than 150 stories in Facebook and 2,500 followers, and around 120 perhaps photographs in Instagram. What is more important is not just the quantity of these stories, it's how many people interact and how they felt connected, and how they tell us how this worked for them in many different directions. First, as a way to connect, also a way to feel hope, and also to escape from something that was very stressful during the passing weeks. And you could see how these levels of anxiety change from week to the other. And also to feel that we create a digital community that we couldn't create before, or perhaps we could, but we didn't really make the effort to connect in the past in this way. Yeah. So what they tell us now, and yesterday we ran an evaluation of the museum just to feel how they feel now that the lockdown is finishing for now. Perhaps there might be another one later, but hopefully not. But how they felt that this medium worked for them. And it's the great majority told us that they want us to continue the activity online and in physical terms. Perhaps develop activities outside the digital world and connect physically with each other, safely as well, and really bring the museum inside our lives every day. Because for me, for many years, my worry was, we love museums, okay? We are museum professionals, we want people to come to museums and to cultural organizations in general, but it's not always easy to make anyone become a museum lover. And everyone can benefit from museums. It's not them that they don't want, it's us that we don't manage to make them be connected to museums and find them relevant to their lives. So for many years I was thinking, how can we make this bridge? And it seems that this difficulty pushed us to do this, and I think it was a very good move, which has a lot of potential.
I think that's absolutely right. So much of the world seems to be fast-tracked the last few weeks, and things that were impossible have become possible in all areas of life. And I think we should hold on to that, and as we go forward, not accept sometimes the bureaucratic hurdles that can be removed quite quickly at a time like this. But I think it's really interesting. You both talked about people's need to talk, the sense of community, to tell a story, and how the museum can be, and physically it was always a place people could go to in times of trouble to escape or to think about something else, and doing that digitally is a brilliant example of that. And Nicole, you're work in Rotterdam, you know, even before this, has very much been about all of those things, the bringing people in to be actually present in the collection. And then these story cafes that you do started as a bridge between the community and the museum, and of course have become digital now. But you want to talk a little bit more about that whole idea, because it's stood well, actually, an idea into what's happening now.
Yeah, well, of course, and I also would like to react on what Marlen just said. But first, to explain a little bit what we are doing, we are setting up what I call an active collection, which is a collection not about objects, but about what people do in the city to make it a better place for everyone, for each other. So we set up a way of nomination and a sort of democratic way of making this collection grow. So we think together with a group of very dedicated Rotterdammers about this collection, and anyone in the city can say, well, I think this should be in the collection, this is important for the city. And then this dedicated group is thinking about it and has some criteria. So we have 80 participants in this collection now, which is actually becoming a network where people are helping each other and helping other people in the city. But it is also a network of giving meaning to city life and making new city rituals, actually, and new city traditions. We thought about ways of making exhibitions about it, and we found the story cafes, so gatherings where people tell the stories about what they are doing, why they are in the collection, were a good thing. So we organized it in the museum and in the city. But now with this lockdown, we organize online story cafes, and we do that as well in smaller neighborhoods with communities in these neighborhoods. And then the strange thing occurred, what Marlen was referring as well, that you organize something on the internet with a very local community, and then suddenly people are connected who you couldn't reach before. So people are logging in to our meetings who never would come to the museum site, never ever. And now they are logging in. So that is really great. And they are hearing the stories of the neighborhood. They are sending us mails afterwards for like, this was such a great intimate way of sharing stories. So actually we found a sort of new path to engage groups who we never could engage before. So that is a sort of great thing happening. On the other side, what is happening now, and all these great stories, will they ever have a place in the museum? Yeah, and will those communities come to the museum? That's a question. I don't know, but it is something to think about, of course.
I want to believe, also because we've been talking for a long time what is a museum and how the museum has to be redefined. That it was very much current issue for us museum professionals in the last years, and is still an open issue to resolve with the museum definition, the new museum definition. Yeah. I more and more think that museums are in a threshold of a change. Not that they will lose what they have, or they will have to deconstruct it. Not at all, but they need to embrace and to accept also other approaches, perhaps more ephemeral, perhaps more fluid, liquid. Sometimes when I want to create an image of the museum, I see it as a wave. not as a building, as something that is very solid and enclosed, but more like a wave, or like a wind that goes across the communities and brings the message. Like the birds in a flock when they immigrate, something like that. How can the museum travel in the community and bring the message? And we are all the museum, even if we're not museum goers, because we can, exactly as you do, Nicole, in Rotterdam, you can bring these voices in the cafes, and the stories they tell are very, very much part of the museum tradition. Whether they will find the final position in a permanent exhibition or in an edition, in a book, that's a different matter. And usually they find, and with the digital tools, they can all be displayed one way or another in a platform. Yeah.
But I think I think the argument about the physical and intellectual breaking of the walls of the building has been a discussion for a long time, and some of the projects are about doing that. I think that will even more be the case now. I mean, we know that particularly, say, in a place like London, with all these huge cultural institutions, people come from all over the world. That's not going to necessarily come back, just like in Greece for a while. So the people who will be coming will be the local neighborhoods and the people from those communities. And that's very much about some of the things you've talked about. How do you build those sustainable relationships with them? And I suppose, Lale, what you're trying to do with your project is use culture and creativity to help build sustainable neighborhoods in the city. That's why you're doing the Barrios Creativos project. So, I mean, how are you thinking about that going forward? Because this is very much about how you embed it in everyday life, as well as through the museums and cultural places in the city.
Yes, I mean, we were about to start the second edition of Barrios Creativos. Barrios Creativos is we work it through a contest. So every neighborhood create and design a project, and then we select the winning neighborhoods. And last year was the first edition, and there was a winning prize. I was Villa Crespo, the neighborhood that won the prize, and 3 special mentions. It's very similar to the number of culture. And now that we were about to start this, the lockdown or the pandemic appeared, and we are trying to think, because it's a very difficult process. We first of all, we select a mentor for each neighborhood. That mentor guide and coordinate all the stakeholders of every place, every neighborhood. So we have to think how we are going to select this mentor. Like, we are going to do workshops online, and then they have to submit a form, an application, and we select it online. Like, it's a very difficult, but the first edition gave us a very hope, because they are all the network that were created last year. They are still working together. They are still gathering online, thinking which ways they will still working together. They are applying to our subsidies. We create special funds for the independent and the community culture sector in Buenos Aires that is huge. In Buenos Aires, we have around 500 cultural centers, theaters, music venues, and they are small. They obviously they are in an economic. This is devastating for them. So we are thinking, emergency funds for them, and they are doing Zooms. Those networks that were created with the Barrios Creativos, trying to apply to these funds and trying to think new ways for them to connect with their communities.
But it does seem that those neighborhood specific things, whether they're story cafes or cultural venues or small areas of production, will be where a lot of the creative drive is going to come in the next period.
Yes.
I think by inevitability, people are thinking more local, you know, the idea of the 15-minute city and everything. So the neighborhoods will be absolutely vital. And I think, you know, the bigger museums and cultural institutions need to connect to that, because that's where people will want to produce and take part. Maybe.
Yes, absolutely.
Question.
And what you said before regarding
Yes.
attracting the locals rather than the global visitors, not that they will not return at some point, but this is the case in Greece as well, because the lifespan of the season for the cultural visits in museums and archaeological sites is usually during the summer, or starts in April and they go till October, November. And the locals connect with the museums and the sites, but in a different way. So now it's an opportunity for all the cultural institutions to invent new ways to connect with the local populations, the local communities, because tourists will not come in large numbers for some time. We wish, but it's not still very safe to travel. So it's an opportunity. As all things, we must see the opportunity within the difficulty, the threat. And it's a big issue. I've been following a lot of the international publications, writing articles about museum closures and how the museum professionals are at risk because of losing jobs. A lot of income will be lost because of the closure. So this is an issue here that, as everywhere, that preoccupies us. On the other hand, museums and a lot of cultural organizations in Greece offered free material all this time. Theaters, the National Theatre, and all the theaters in Athens. Athens is has 500 theaters operating even during the time of crisis. They offered a lot of shows for free without copyright issues, but they are now at huge risk to close down because of the lack of funds to support them. Whilst it's still not safe to be in large numbers within the theater. So it's a lot of things at stake here now.
Yeah, and that's very much from the perspective of the organizations, of the cultural organizations like the museums and the theaters, and how they can survive. But from the perspective of the neighborhoods, also where Lali is working in, it's less about museums and more about how culture, how heritage, how art can help bring resilience in the neighborhoods, probably. Do you see opportunities at this moment because of the crisis and what we talked before about digital opportunities? Is that something you could build upon?
Well, it's difficult to that question because, well, it's like this is changing day by day, and you know the emotions are going like up and down within the neighborhood with the community. Like they are like, okay, what we are going to do? They have to deal with their own difficult situations, but then still, you know, give support to one another and say, okay, let's do a meeting. Let's find ways to, I would say, survive, because it's like it's something that, you know, it's like Marlen says, you know, they live the incomes, like they don't have any income now, and you know we're talking about small communities, local businesses, local theaters, local cinemas, libraries. Basically, what they are doing is trying to find ways of surviving. You know, subsidies, or maybe selling or going live or playing some well, performing a play, and you know, people from local businesses donate something.
Mm-hmm.
Now they are like dealing with that situation. It's like, you know, it's not a very optimistic scenario for them.
I know when I first met you, Lali, you were the development officer for the district of Boca around there, and I remember that because that's so orientated to tourism, but also almost everyone in that community was an artisan in some way, whether that was food or the tourism or the painted houses or the theatre or everything happening there. So that ecosystem is really, you know, must be really, really in, you know, pulled every way at this point.
Yes, well, the art district, obviously, La Boca is a neighborhood located at the south of the city, and it's kind of a rundown area that we are trying to, well, we are redeveloping, but it has this sense of community and solidarity that we were talking about. And yeah, it's like it's a mix of stakeholders, because you have, you know, a very important art center, private art center, and you have a local museum, and you have art workers on the street that live for tourism. That is the first income. La Boca is the most visited place in Argentina, the first one. And then now it's all gone, you know, they don't have anything. So they are trying to, well, they have this sense of community that I think that is one of the most important things they have, because they are sharing and give between them hope and resilience, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult to imagine how the impact of the current situation is in different places of the world, of course. But if I look around me here in Rotterdam and I see what's happening with little shop owners and how they're struggling, I can imagine how it is where the infrastructure maybe is less stable. Yeah,
yes,
it is difficult. But now imagine we leave this crisis behind and we learned, you know, about the power of community and about also new ways of reaching out to different communities. What is your vision then of the future and the role of culture for our future society? It's a very broad question, but I thought maybe you have a sort of like idea, oh, this is where we're going, something like
Where
that.
we shouldn't go back to as well.
Oh yeah. Lali,
Marlen?
do you have an idea?
well, I think that our first lesson is like how important is culture and well, heritage museum and also as a tool of connecting and of entertainment. I think that during this lockdown, everyone has read a book, listened to music, you know, or see movies, or, you know, and that is all. It's all come from culture for the creative community. So I think that more than ever, culture has a very central role in our day-to-day life, everyday life. And then, you know, it's like giving voice to a community, sharing our experiences, and I think that, well, maybe because of my actual situation, current situation, talking to senior citizens, to elderly people, they have so much to share, and they have, you know, stories to tell. And I think that, well, connecting generation to generation, that this bridge that I was talking about, I think that we can create a lot of things around this idea of giving voice to a community, or or building bridge generation to generations. I think that we are going to, and I think that we have to maybe think that this could be one of many pandemics that we're going to get. Maybe it's not the first. We don't know that, but we have to be prepared if something like this could happen again. So I think that this access to internet, access to technology, how to use the technology for all the community, for all the citizens is something essential. It has to be a right now. The state should guarantee that access more than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Culture is a common good, a public asset. It should be accessible and open for everyone. If we talked in the past about the democratization of culture, is now the moment to talk loud about it. And what we've seen during these weeks of pandemic is that, of course, the health personnel, all the units, all the health staff been extremely important for the community resilience and our well-being. But we need also the mental health, and to be mentally well and emotionally stable, we need a lot to work with the beauty that comes through culture in all its forms. And these last weeks, days, there are signs in Facebook that we can put on our profile picture, support art workers. I don't know if I think it's global, this label, support art workers, because they go through this crisis and they're at risk of their job loss, etc. Not only the art workers, a lot of other businesses, but somewhere I read that these signs should not be there at all. It goes without saying that art is very meaningful and very important for our lives, culture, heritage. But is it so? I mean, the message perhaps we should bring, I agree totally with Lali, is that the states have to support culture, because culture is not a luxury, is a necessity for our better present and future, for our well-being. And everyone should have access to it, and everyone should be able to produce it and share it with the others. We just need to find the mechanisms and the networks that will support, work on the sustainability of cultural organizations. And perhaps now that big blockbuster events, big concerts, big exhibitions will not be possible for some time, we need to go for small productions that are perhaps easy to produce even in small cultural organizations, and support them in many different ways. We need to reinvent some of the things we did, but really bring them in a different level and share in a very democratic and open space. It sounds very utopic and ideological and ideal, but I'm sure it happens. It can happen. And what experience from other crises tells us is that only through networking we can manage this. Perhaps networking that is very inventive, not networking within our circles only, but networking cross-cultural, cross-sectoral, so that we can build a resilient and solid networks that can last longer.
I think that's absolutely right. The partnership is the key, and it's particularly in this recovery phase, if you want to call it, it's that multidimensional partnerships and alliances. But also, I also think some of the things you've both all talked about were being sort of driven by the climate change agenda. Anyway, things about blockbusters and how we produce and how cultural economy works and all of that were gradually changing, certainly in the north, in North America and Europe. I think the discourse was like that. This has acted as a bit of an accelerator to all of those debates. So I do think, although the pandemic has created a particular focus. It is logic that we were following in many ways that I think we have to just push on with it. And I think, you know, one of the things about climate change, however much your belief in the changes, it was slow. It's been slow, whether that's at a government level about emissions or whether that's about blockbuster exhibitions in museums. But then again, we found out the last few months that things can move really, really quickly. So, so you know, that's quite interesting. What do you think, Nicole? Sorry, Marlene.
Just a second to say something that I feel very strong about it. When we traveled a lot around the world, when we had this opportunity, it was very important for to open our minds and to open our hearts in different cultures and different perspectives. It's very important not to lose this global perspective in our lives, because the closing of the borders to protect the citizens from the pandemic, it was necessary, but we should not close the borders of our minds and of our hearts into understanding other cultures. So we need, for some time, for this interim period that we cannot travel that much, we must bring the global into local and really bridge in many different ways, not only within our national, communities or local communities, but really like what you are doing now, talk with the world in order to learn from each other.
Nicole.
Yeah, and in so many ways we need culture because it is so many times the glue for people to live together, to understand each other, but also what you said, Lali, to make life bearable and nice. Yeah, I think, and that's also what you said, Marlen, we should really continue like connecting through culture and make local work connected to the global world, and let's try to find the speed we found now and use that for other challenges we meet as well. Yeah. So I think we learn so many things in this time also about ourselves.
We've done an hour on the live stream. Maybe we could bring that formal part to the end. I think that's a great way to summarize it, Marlen. This is, you know, we call this "It's Good to Talk," and we are global, you know, in our perspective, and that's exactly what this is all about. And you know, as we know, though we are reminded, there's more that we have in common across the world as human beings than divides us, though often we get into the divided part. So that's so important to talk, and we're going to continue this. And I know colleagues in lots of other networks are doing it as well, and we want to tune in some of that. But that's been a great start, free-ranging conversation. Thank you ever so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much, Don and Nicole, and very nice to meet you, Marlen. This has been a pleasure for me.
Buenos Aires is a destination I want to have in my life very soon. So
you must.
When we're allowed.
Very, very nice.